Hello folks, I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the 1980 short story by Ramsey Campbell called Before the Storm, which was published in this reprint of all of his Cthulhu Mythos stuff called Cold Print that we've been doing a deep dive into as we get ready to do a bunch of horror stuff for this channel for my Cthulhu October, which I dedicate each of my three reviews on a weekly basis to the Cthulhu Mythos. And so now we've been doing a deeper dive into this collection. It was republished of all of his works in the 90s. And it has a lot of fun stuff that happened in it. So we're doing a deep dive into it. This is the second printing. I'll link you to it on Amazon.com in the comments below in case you're interested in following along. Anyway, so again, I like to review, as a reminder, I do three major genres for this channel: horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and now we're doing a horror side of things. Now we've been doing a review. This is the first short story in this collection chronologically that they've been published in, that was not published in the early or mid-60s. So we've now jumped 15 years in Ramsey Campbell's writing career. So we've gotten to a place where he's much more advanced than he was when he was publishing his first stuff in the Cthulhu Mythos as a teenager. For example, this book was written in the 80s, Midnight Sun, where he has a lot more ability as a writer. His writing style is not just horror, but it adds in elements of awesomeness and wonder as you're reading, in addition to horror too. And that sort of a combination of a sense of awe and a sense of horror is something that Algernon Blackwood, a famous UK writer, is generally considered to be one of the best ones out there. And his short story, The Willows, which I've actually reviewed for you, is considered by many people, myself included, to be the best horror short story of all time. So, he sort of tries to emulate that style. Other writers near the end of, after getting to a while, include H.P. Lovecraft, whose stuff in the 30s tended to have a much better sort of a sense of these two combinations combined. And so, as he neared the end of his life, and had been in his career for a while too, during the pulp era. So again, this is a lot of sort of fun stuff that's happening. 1980 short story also is part of our key things that our channel cares about. Remember, the title of his channel, The Worst Thing About New Books, is a quote by Jacques Joubert, a French philosopher, said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old ones. And so a 1980 short story in this collection, that's decades ago, right? And so that has a lot of value to this. And so a lot of things I like to try to do is find these classics or these great writers that are known in the UK for horror, and then do a deeper dive into some of their older stuff, right? And I like to do a lot of older sort of things from the pulp era or the 60s in this case, the first few stories in this book, and so forth. I'm giving this short story 7+. It's written well, it's gripping, it's only 10 pages long. It took me like 18 minutes last night for me to read it for the second time after I knocked out this collection for Cthulhu Mythos October. As a reminder, the Cthulhu Mythos is a shared horror universe that was created by H.P. Lovecraft. He used some of his elements again and again and again in his horror stories, and sometimes his fantasy stories too, actually, in the Dreamlands. For example, he created a book called the Necronomicon, which is an evil book when you read it, and then he used it in multiple of his stories, including his classic seminal work that sort of invented the Cthulhu Mythos writ large, The Call of Cthulhu, which is where the fan name from the Cthulhu Mythos. And then he began to use elements that other writers that were writing for a magazine in the pulp era called Weird Tales were using, and vice versa. And sometimes their stories were published outside of Weird Tales for other magazines too, but that was the big one, with their key three, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft, each sort of exchanging each other's sorts of key stories and elements, and they're the three big writers of that pulp magazine too. Anyway, so that's where this sort of shared universe comes from, and this is set in that shared universe too. Again, I keep my reviews spoiler free, so basically what's happening is that we have a case that's being investigated as a mental case by our point of view character, which is the psychologist, who is going to be doing a deep dive into this. And there are some mentions and some shout outs and some so forth to characters within the Cthulhu Mythos. Now, Ramsey Campbell wrote a lot of stuff in the Cthulhu Mythos, particularly early on in his career. He created a section of the UK, which he knew very well because he's from the UK, called Severn Valley, which he added to the Cthulhu Mythos, where a lot of his short stories in the mythos are set in this creative work that's decadent and has all these sort of mysteries of the past that have been long since forgotten or still buried, right? And so that's sort of a thing that you'll get from these short stories that he added. Similarly, H.P. Lovecraft himself, when he was creating Cthulhu Mythos, he would do that with things like, for example, the town of Innsmouth that he created for the Shadow over Innsmouth, which is this decadent port town that's been around for decades and decades and decades, longer than it should have been, and it has this dilapidated ancient feel to it, and it drips horror from every pore, right? And similarly, he has the Miskatonic University, Miskatonic River. He creates a lot of geographical areas in New England, which is where he sets his stories because he's from New England, right? So that's something that I like Ramsey Campbell did. I like that he did that. He just didn't say, oh, I'm going to write my stories in New England, even though I'm not from New England. I'm from the UK, right? Or just set it in London or Liverpool or something. But he actually invents an area and adds it to the establishment too, and I like that. So this does have a few shots out here and there from the mental health patient that's being observed from our point of view character, and then that's it. That's sort of it for the Cthulhu Mythos element. So it's rather light in the Cthulhu Mythos. It's just the occasional shot out here and there, and that's it. But it's definitely in the Cthulhu Mythos. And again, we mean a 7+, like a 7.2 or 7.3 that I'm running down to a 7. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. It's not that long, so I don't want to spend too much of your time with, doing a deep dive into this short story for you. But there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read this short story? What did you think about it? Did you agree or disagree with my ratings? Would you like to talk about the spoilers in the comments? Let's do so. If you enjoyed this video, hey, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.